Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. My name is Rachel Conley, and I'm a Regional Director with Growing Hope Globally. And I am glad to welcome you here today. Today, we'll be talking about how you can leave a legacy of hope through Growing Hope Globally. In case you're new to our organization, Growing Hope Globally works with farmers, churches, agribusinesses, and many others here in the U.S. to support agricultural development programs around the world that help farmers help themselves and find lasting solutions to hunger. I'd like to take a moment to say a huge thank you to everyone who is already giving as a legacy giver through Growing Hope, and all the wonderful donors we have. Thank you for including us in your estate plans. We're extremely grateful. And if that's not something you've already done, but you're interested in learning more, you're in the right place. That's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm excited to introduce Kirby Hughes Marks, who will be our speaker today. Kirby's a former member of the Growing Hope Globally board and a current member of our Resource Development Committee. She's been with the Christian Church Foundation as vice president for 28 years, and she has a lot of wonderful experience that we can learn from. So I will let her take it from here, but just a quick note that if you do have any questions, please go ahead and enter those in the question and answer box, and we'll get to those a little bit later. So thank you, Kirby. Welcome, and I'll let you take it from here.
Well, great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Rachel. I appreciate the opportunity to share about a topic that is very important to me, leaving a legacy for whatever charitable organization, but especially also maybe our children as well. And we want to highlight the great work of Growing Hope that you might also consider leaving a legacy to this wonderful organization. I served for 6 years on their board, got to know some incredible people and to witness the great work that is going on around the world. So thank you for taking time to watch this webinar for the next several minutes. And I do will be happy to respond to any questions. Even after the program is over, you are welcome to reach out to me for any other questions that you might have. So when we think about legacy planning, what does that really mean? Legacy is sort of what it is that we want to leave behind to not only charitable causes, but especially our children. What is it that we want to do to impact our children and for the next generation? So what we want to do is consider what we could call end-of-life gifts to support charitable causes, to support Growing Hope globally, and possibly even including your children in part of that decision-making, because whatever legacy you leave them, it will also have an impact on the charitable causes that might benefit as well from your estate planning. So we have found over time that involving children is a much healthier and more a better way, I guess, to make sure that that your life and your legacy lives on in the way that you want, and have your children support you in that endeavor as well. So why is it we should begin this planning? If we have not put an estate together, a will, trust, all those important documents, and die without a will, the statistics continue to tell us that 7 out of 10 people in this country die without a will or some sort of plan in place. And wherever you are residing right now, whatever state you are living in, that state has already written a will for you. So either you can have control over the disposition of your assets, or you can leave the state to make that decision. I think all of us would probably want to say that we would rather be in control of our legacy rather than the state where we live. I ran across this quote a few days ago, is that someday is not a day of the week. So we need to think about planning and putting our plans in place so that we know that what we have done while we're living will be able to be passed on after we are gone. So why is it that people hesitate to plan their legacies? I think if we were to sit here with a whiteboard and just throw up your ideas about why we haven't gotten around to this, these are some of the greatest responses. This is too complicated and overwhelming. Yes, estate planning can be, and the more children, grandchildren we have, the more property we own, the more we are spread out over various states of where we might own assets, it does become complicated and overwhelming. But as much as it took us to acquire our wealth, it is equally important to make sure we are going to dispose of our wealth in ways that are fruitful and beneficial. I don't know where to go to for good advice. We find this a lot, especially maybe in smaller communities where there is just not a plethora of estate planning attorneys close by. So knowing where to go in terms of talking to your neighbors, your friends, your church friends, where do you get your estate planning done? And you may have to drive into different towns, maybe do a Zoom visit with an attorney, but it's important to start finding those people that can help you in that journey. I don't have enough assets to need a will or trust. Anybody with a dollar bill in a bank account has an estate. So a will and or a trust are very important. I've heard stories of people that thought, well, I just don't own enough. And so then late in life, they inherited money from an aunt or uncle and then died with all of all of those assets. And there was no will or trust to dispose of those. I'll do it later. I would say this is the number one reason we get. It's called procrastination. We know it's important, but we'll put it off because we got to take the kids to soccer practice, or we got to go visit the grandkids and watch their play, or we have to cook a meal for the church dinner. Procrastination can really be a barrier to really anything that we do. I trust my family to take care of my affairs after I pass. Again, not a good solution, because even though we might tell our sons and daughters where we want our legacy to go, once you die, it is their inheritance, and they can choose to do with their inheritance what they would like. I can tell many, many stories. And then finally, talking about death is not my idea of a fun time. Well, no, it's really not. But we all know that life is finite, and at some point we need to make plans to make sure that our estate and our assets go to where we intend them to go. So I'd like to talk about this. It's called a triangle that kind of describes what we call social capital. It's kind of a difficult slide to describe. And I actually heard a seminar this morning that's going to help kind of describe this a little bit differently. But as we go along in our lives and we accumulate assets and we have income, we always want to make sure that there's enough to take care of ourselves, our immediate family. And then beyond our immediate family, are there others? Children, grandchildren that we want to accommodate and have dollars that are available for them in whatever ways we might want to pass or give them to them. And then this top part of the triangle is where we get to decide what we call our social capital, where it might go. So the seminar I heard this morning, she said that at some point you have enough. And when we have enough, that's usually when we have completed the first and the second layers of that triangle. But then when we find that we have more than enough, we have more than we need for our daily needs, what then are we going to do with that excess? If we don't do proper planning, a lot of that can be going to taxes. If we fail to properly invest or save or create some sort of gifting vehicles that could possibly save us on taxes, and then we decide where our social capital can be spent in terms of our assets going to charity and wonderful organizations like Growing Hope. So just a little thought-provoking way to think about how we garner our assets and then how we spend our assets as well. When I'm with people, I usually say, pull out your checkbook or your credit card statement and tell me what is important in your life. And so most recently, the things that are the most important in my life and where I see my income being paid out is obviously family. My 2 daughters and my 3 grandsons and my new husband of 6 months and his 2 sons. I want to spend a lot of time and a lot of money supporting them and doing things with my immediate family. But then I also, of course, support my local congregation. I support organizations related to the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, my college, local public television, public radio, my first husband's, and actually my second husband's alma mater, Oklahoma State University, and especially then Growing Hope Globally. So my outgo, hopefully as I do my legacy planning, will be reflected in my the gifts that I might want to give through the assets I transfer at death. Well, I think if any of you read the Bible, you might remember the story of Noah, and guess what? It was not raining when Noah built the ark. So he was given a lot of time to plan ahead, to build that ark, to gather the animals. But it hadn't started raining yet until he had finished his preparation. And I always like to ask a room full of ministers, Reverend Smith, have you ever seen a U-Haul on the back of a hearse? Meaning you can't take it with us. Walter knew that he couldn't take his earthly treasures to heaven, but that didn't stop him from trying. So as we go along in life, we just have to remember that whatever we possess, someday it will not be ours as we enter our heavenly reward, and then others have the value of the gifts and the assets that we leave behind. And then finally, the good old cartoon with Frank and Ernest talking to his financial planner. I'm not worried about taking it with me. I just like it to last until I go. I talk to so many seniors who say, I've got money, I have income, but what if I live to be 105 and I have to spend my last years in a nursing home? Or, what is it, other things that are going to take a lot of my money before I die? How do I know at what point I can release gifts and be comfortable making sure my plan is going to benefit other organizations? So just a little laugh to kind of keep us on track as we talk about these interesting topics. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which was passed in 2025. Now, usually when we're talking to folks about leaving a legacy and charitable giving, typically you don't try to lead with the tax conversation. Usually you want to lead with talking about the benefits of the organization and the outcomes and all the good things that can happen with gifts that are given. But because a lot of people do give because of the tax implication, there was a lot of changes that came through in 2025. And I'm sure when you did your taxes this year, you witnessed a lot of those changes. So I just want to run through a few things to make sure we're kind of understanding what and how taxes might affect our legacy planning. So the estate tax is assessed to us when we pass away after adding up everything that we own. As long as you are under that $13.99 million of valuation of all your assets, you will not be subject to federal estate tax. This is increasing this year in 2026 to 15 million, and it will be adjusted with inflation in years going forward. When I first started doing these seminars well over 40 years ago, the estate tax exemption was $200,000. And back then there was a lot of work done to try to help people reduce and eliminate federal estate taxes with trusts and other mechanisms. So you can see over time how this exemption has dramatically increased to where a couple, I believe this is an individual number. So an individual this year can die with $15 million of assets and not be subject to federal estate tax. So it's just something to keep in mind, that a lot of people fear the federal estate tax, but if you are over that amount, then it's time to visit with a estate tax attorney to help reduce that and minimize that federal estate tax bite. This will be considered permanent because there was no sunset provisions under the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. However, a future Congress could reduce the exemption amount going forward. So as Congress does what Congress does, we'll just have to wait and see if this is going to become permanent or if it might go back to an exemption rate prior to this tax change. The other thing that most of you probably recognized is that the standard deduction increased in 2025 for a couple 31,500, and that will be adjusted for inflation in future years, meaning that charitable giving really may or may not actually be a benefit to be able to itemize rather than taking a standard deduction. Other things like mortgage payments, interest payments, and SALT taxes, other things could add up to beyond that 31.5. But more and more people, dramatically more and more people, will not be able to itemize and will simply take the standard deduction. There was a temporary deduction for seniors over the age 65 that is only available through 2028. So again, increased benefit of standard deductions for individuals that will be phased out for higher income taxpayers. And really what we see now is far less than 10% of all taxpayers will be itemizing their deductions going forward. So again, if we start out by saying, make a contribution to my organization and get a tax deduction, a lot of people will be saying, but I don't really get a tax deduction because I can take the standard deduction. Again, something to work with your CPA, tax advisors on ways that you might be able to mitigate the opportunity or give credence to opportunities to be able to itemize, or simply change the ways in which you give, that we'll talk about here in just a minute. So from a tax benefit, that has gone down dramatically. Again, most people give out of the goodness of their heart because they love their organization and want to give regardless of the tax benefit. But it is just something to keep in mind as we move forward. Some other more details. Beginning in 2026, non-itemizers can now deduct up to $2,000 for a couple of a cash contribution. So where if you cannot itemize, at least there will now be a $2,000 deduction that can be taken off of income taxes. Also, people can give away up to 60% of their AGI, adjusted gross income, for cash gifts. The previous limitation was 50%. And I know you're thinking, boy, that's a lot of money to give away. But I was just with a gentleman a few weeks ago who said he is giving up to that 60% of his AGI away to charity. He has the ability to do that, and he loves church causes and hospital causes, and he wants to give his money away, so he sees it at work while he's still living. Beginning next year in 2027, there will be a tax credit for gifts to scholarship granting organizations. So basically private schools, grades K through 12, up to $1,700. And then of course, there's going to be some negative things for higher earners in the 37% tax bracket. They will not be able to deduct 100% of their contributions. There's a complex formula they have to go through to find out what they can deduct. And there will be a new floor on charitable deductions equal to 0.5% of the AGI. Again, if you're in those high earning tax brackets, please see a CPA or your accountant to see ways in which you can kind of work around these limitations that the new OBBBA bill brought to us. So, okay, enough of that tax stuff. When we begin our planning, there are 4 very important documents that everyone needs to have. Everyone needs a will or a living trust. As I've mentioned, the statistics continue to tell us 7 out of 10 people in this country die without a will or a trust or some sort of plan in place. A lot of people have gravitated toward trusts, and that there's a lot of benefit to that by keeping your assets out of probate. Everyone, though, with a trust would need what we call a pour over will to make sure any assets outside of the trust then pour into the trust at death. The 3 other very important documents is financial power of attorney, who's going to step in and write your bill or pay your bills, write checks, take care of your financial needs. Then the other two go hand in hand, the healthcare power of attorney, as well as a living will, or what we call an advanced healthcare directive, so that you tell the hospital and the doctors what you want to, in a medical situation, to be kept alive, or to be, to pull the plug, as they say. I'm working with a lady right now who has just been diagnosed the early stages of Alzheimer's. And so fortunately, she has two very good friends who are working with her as their healthcare power of attorney and will help follow her living will. Unfortunately, though, she does not have such a person to be her financial power of attorney. So there's a little bit of immediacy need for her to try to find someone to fill that role. So as banks typically will not do that for individuals. But again, every situation is different. I encourage you to talk with your own advisors if these are issues that may be of concern to you. So if you've not gotten the will yet, there are still some really important steps you can take to kind of get this planning going. Now is a good time to review and update all your beneficiary designations on your IRAs, all retirement accounts, life insurance policies, bank accounts, investment accounts. Has there been a death or a divorce within the family that names need to be taken off or added to? It can be very unsettling for individuals to benefit from these accounts that the owner of the account really did not intend to have that go to a certain individual because they just failed to update those accounts years and years ago. Another thing that, again, kind of difficult to talk about, but to consider pre-planning your burial and funeral. With my first husband, it became important to me as if something had happened to me, I did not feel like John would have been able to take care of this. So we paid the funeral home for either one of our demises, I guess. When John did pass away, it was a great relief because everything was sort of already in place. So consider that as well. Do an inventory of your assets. If you've not gone to the attorney, just write down what you own, what you owe, get a spreadsheet, pencil, paper, Excel spreadsheet on the computer, download something that you can just begin filling in, the life insurance policies, where's the retirement accounts, where's the safe deposit box key, where are the important documents, and start gathering those things in one place, and then begin to take inventory of all those things that you own. I also found after my mother died that it was very helpful that she had already put in her documents the names and addresses and social security numbers of my siblings. I'm sure I could have gotten those very easily from each of them, but Mom had them written down in one place, and that helped as we began working and putting her estate in place. And another really important thing is if you've got charitable organizations you want to benefit from your estate, get their tax ID number. It's very helpful for the attorney to have that because he or she's going to have to put that in the document, or you would have to put in your will or trust, or you'll have to put that on a beneficiary form. So go to those organizations' websites and start jotting down tax ID numbers for future reference. So how is it that we begin doing legacy planning? Charitable organizations, time and time again, over and over, they report that the vast majority of gifts that they receive upon a person's demise comes from a bequest in a will or trust, simply that says, I give and bequeath X% to Growing Hope Globally from my estate. Very few are doing these other kinds of charitable plans that we'll talk about here in a minute. So if nothing else, just as you get your will or your trust in order, make sure you have that list of charitable causes and put those, make sure they are listed adequately and appropriately in your documents. We're going to talk a little bit more as to why designating retirement and other tax-deferred assets to charity are ways to maximize the value of the estate that can pass on to heirs. Just real quickly is that if what you have been able to do with your retirement accounts over your lifetime is defer the taxes until you have reached a certain age, whether it was 70 or 73, soon to be 75, then you have to take those and make a distribution from those funds. If you decide I'm going to leave all of those retirement assets to my children, the children don't get to defer the taxes. They must continue paying those taxes. So we're going to talk a little bit more about some strategies on how to best minimize the taxes and maximize what's going to go to charity and to your children. You might also want to consider funding what we call a deferred gift that can provide a current income tax deduction, again, hoping that a deduction from your taxes can be done, and provide you lifetime income. Sometimes people say, I want to be generous and give something away, but yet I'd like to have a little bit of benefit from that. I usually describe a deferred gift as getting a plate of brownies, giving away a plate of brownies to the charity. But over my lifetime, I can eat one brownie, maybe one brownie a year, as long as I live, and still have a benefit from that plate of brownies. And at my death, and whatever remains on that platter then goes to charity. So maybe kind of a fun way to think about a deferred gift. You can name charity, Growing Hope Globally, beneficiary of life insurance, bank accounts, real estate. Recently, I retitled my cars, and it's, at least in the state of Missouri, I did a TOD, transfer on death, to my children, my two daughters. Did not know that was a possibility. Maybe that's a new law, but I did learn that once I moved from Kansas to Missouri recently. Then we have the final opportunities, what we call a life estate gift. I won't go into a lot of detail, but a life estate gift allows a person to give away a piece of property, let's say the house that they're living in, and just give the deed to the charitable organization. And then this person can continue to live in the house, pay the taxes, pay insurance, keep up the house, and actually get a tax deduction over a portion of the value of the house. And then at that person's death, then the charity, because their name is already on the deed, they can take immediate property of that house. We see this a lot around colleges and universities. A lot of churches sometimes will approach neighbors close by if they would like to have valuable property that they would like to expand upon, and offer them this life estate agreement so that at that person's death, the charity or the church takes immediate possession, rather than that house being tied up in probate for 1 to 2 years. So you're saying, boy, I can't wait until I die so my charities get all my money. And then we think, but can't we do something right now? We can start making legacy gifts now. We don't have to wait until we die. So here are 3 options about just giving your money away now and seeing the value of what those dollars can do. Hopefully you're all aware that donating appreciated assets such as stocks can be given right to a charity without having to pay the capital gains. So if you had a stock that you bought for $10, and now it's worth $100, and you say, I really don't need this stock anymore, you just gift it away to Growing Hope Globally. They get to sell the stock, take the proceeds from it. You get 100% charitable deduction on the value of that gift, plus you don't have to pay capital gains. So it's sort of a win-win situation. The second thing that I hope any of you who are watching this, who are over the age of 70, you have become aware of donating to charity through what we call a QCD, a Qualified Charitable Distribution. Back in 2006, Congress got their act together and they said, we're going to allow individuals to take money directly from their IRA and give it straight to a charity without having to pay the income tax on it, and without, of course, also not being able to take a charitable tax deduction. The benefit being that it reduces the value of maybe a very large IRA. And for you as the donor, instead of writing checks all the time to your church or to Growing Hope or whatever, you just go to your IRA, and that can start making those pledge gifts and reducing the future value of that IRA that would could possibly then also pass on to your children. So right now, back when with legislation started in 2006, the age was 70 and a half, to where you had to start taking your RMD, required minimum distribution. Right now, that is age 73. And by the time I get to age 73, it's going to jump up to age 75. So I have many more years that I have to wait to do my RMD. But when I hit age 70 and a half, they fixed that at that rate, at that age. So when at 70 and a half, then I'm going to start making my charitable gifts for my IRA, again, to avoid me having to write checks to my church and other charitable causes. Instead, it comes straight out of the IRA. And then finally, it's what we call a donor advised fund. And what is a donor advised fund? Back in the day, there used to be that really, really rich people would go and create a foundation, the Smith Family Foundation, with all the millions of dollars they had, and then give the money away to, get a grant request from charities and then give that money away. Well, over time, family foundations have become rather, what do I want to say, just more than families want to handle, because there's all kinds of government regulations, minimums of what has to be given away. You have to pay attorneys, you have to pay a staff to manage a big foundation. And so this other opportunity now is available not just to all the millionaires, but also just to you and me, to do a donor advised fund. These are usually sponsored by foundations or community organizations. Not all charities do donor advised funds. Fidelity, Vanguard, Edward Jones, most of the major investment companies offer donor advised funds. So with my organization, Christian Church Foundation, our minimum is just $10,000 to transfer stocks, bonds, cash, real estate into this donor advised fund. The person giving that gift gets an immediate tax deduction in the year the gift was given, 100% of the full value. But then that donor can say, okay, now who is it that I want to give my grants out to this year? And it's not like those charities are coming to you with a grant request. It's that you, as the donor, you can sit back and say, I'd like to give, $500 to that program in Peru that Growing Hope is doing, or maybe I'll give an extra gift to my church because there's a hurricane relief fund I want to contribute to. So much flexibility with donor advised funds. I would strongly encourage you, if you have excess stocks or cash that you would like to utilize as sort of your benevolent fund. I visited a lady over the weekend. She says her kids call it Mom's Benevolent Fund, and that's where she gives away her gifts from. Consider a donor advised fund. I'd be happy to share more about that with you as well. When we think about the ways we give, a lot of people say, well, how much should I give? What is an adequate amount that I should give to my church or my charitable causes? I offer them 3 examples. The Bible has always taught us to give 10%, that tithe, that first tithe of the estate, or the first 10% that we gift to the temple, as it were. So that's one baseline that I encourage. In fact, all of my assets I'm giving away 10% to my church causes, and the rest divided between my daughters. Others are more familiar with an idea that we call a child share. So let's say you have 2 children, and consider your charitable cause that 3rd child, and then give an amount equal to what your children and heirs will give. So it's kind of a way to teach your children a wonderful lesson about this equality of love that you have for your kids as well as for the charities. And then the third is what we call a pledge replacement gift. Let's say you've been giving regularly to Growing Hope Globally, and you say, I really would like that giving to go on when I'm gone. So take that amount in your head of an organization that you're giving to. So I like to use kind of round numbers. So if somebody is giving $4,000 a year to Growing Hope, that person multiplies that amount times 25, which equals $100,000. So in the estate plan, I want to give and bequeath $100,000 to Growing Hope. And I kind of like this idea of endowing this gift. So I want Growing Hope to keep that money and invest it. And then maybe it pays out a 4% dividend each year. $4,000, you have replaced your pledge. So those are just three ways in which we think about what is an adequate amount and what is it, how do I want to give to my charities, but also still make sure that my children are cared for as well. I like to talk about my mother, and I know that she loves it every time that she thinks she knows that I'm putting this on a screen. Although she passed away, 12 years ago, I think she still likes having her name called out. She left 1/6 of her assets to our church, First Christian Church in McPherson, Kansas, which included IRA assets that were not taxed. Well, there was only 5 kids, so First Christian Church became that 6th child. And they received an amount of money that they put into an endowment fund, and the income from that endowment fund then pays back to the church budget. Unfortunately, it's not enough that would adequately cover what her pledge was, but her giving goes on forever. And so I like to call it, her name was Porteous. I like to call it Porty's Perpetual Pledge Permanent Fund that will forever and ever benefit my home church in Kansas. So we mentioned a little bit about a deferred gift. Basically, people that want to say, I want to be charitable, but I'd really like to have some benefit from this gift. So a deferred gift, we're going to specifically talk about a charitable trust and a charitable gift annuity. You place an asset into this deferred gift. You receive a tax deduction the year the gift is given. You receive some sort of annual income. And then the remainder at your death then would pass to Growing Hope Globally or any of the charities that you would want to name. So the first one that we talk about that is really a very simple contract that is established between the charity and the donor. Now, Growing Hope does not have a charitable gift annuity program, but maybe through your denominational foundation or your community foundation, you can institute a charitable gift annuity and name Growing Hope as a beneficiary. Gift annuities rates are based on your age. And for once, the older you are, the higher the rate. So it's really good to get older because the rates continue to rise the older you are. So Mrs. Green decides she wants to put $10,000 into a charitable gift annuity at age 80. Her income stream is 8.1%. Of that amount of her $810, over $580 is tax-free, meaning she's not paying taxes on the majority of that distribution. And she kind of likes that idea of not having to pay taxes, as we witnessed before in some of our previous comments. She's going to get a tax deduction if she's able to itemize, of course, of $4,500. And then charitable gift annuities will return on average 50% of the original gift to the charity. So if she lives the right number of years and all the actuarial tables line up and the stock market behaves, then a $10,000 gift annuity will give Growing Hope $5,000 at the time of Mrs. Green's death. Now, the second thing is what we call a charitable remainder trust. A trust has a great deal of flexibility. So John and Mary Smith have a piece of property that they purchased for $50,000. And now that property has gained value to over $500,000. If they were to go to sell that, they would have to pay capital gains taxes. Now, they're very much charitably minded, so they say, let's put this into a charitable remainder trust. So they transfer the property itself to the trust. The trust then sells that, and because it's a charitable trust, there are no taxes. Plus, they get to avoid the income taxes or the capital gains taxes. A trust has to pay out a minimum of 5% of whatever the annual market value is, and that is set by the IRS, not by any charity. The IRS mandates that at least 5% has to be paid out. So in this example, we're going to say we can earn 7% inside this trust. And so John and Mary are going to live about 25 years. So over their lifetime, they're going to get income of over $817,000. They're going to get a tax deduction the year they make the gift of $208,000. And so over 25 years, as the trust has been able to grow while still paying out income, Growing Hope Globally is going to get a gift of over $826,000. It's a win-win-win situation for folks who have appreciated assets, who are charitably minded, and would like to have income for the time that they are still alive. Now, in this case, they could actually add John and Mary Jr. on as income beneficiaries, which will kind of show a different example of that here in a minute. So we have some donors with the foundation down in Texas. They own 256-acre ranch that had appreciated highly in value. Their 5 children had absolutely no interest in keeping the ranch. The couple loved their church, but also wanted to leave their children something. So they gave the farm and funded a charitable remainder trust. And what happened? They saved capital gains taxes on the appreciation. They received a charitable income tax donation. They provided for 5 children with an annual source of income for 20 years. And it eliminated the headaches and fears associated with trying to keep a tract of land that was no longer of use to them. Jim said, I told the kids that they would get as much money out of the trust as if we had sold the ranch and divided the money 5 ways. So there's so many plus benefits to doing charitable trusts. Again, your denomination, religious denomination could help you with this, or any attorney also can draft and put together charitable trusts for donors. Okay, we're going to circle back to this, the concerns that we have about our IRAs and retirement assets. I think it was 2020 that Congress passed what we call the Secure Act 2.0. And what they did basically is they removed what we call the stretch out provisions that IRAs have. So when I inherited an IRA from my mother in 2014, I am able to stretch that IRA out throughout my entire lifetime. I have to take a required minimum distribution, but I can keep that until the day I die and then gift it away. This removal of the stretch means that any non-spousal beneficiary, so your children, grandchildren, must empty that IRA within 10 years after the death of the holder. So that means your heirs are going to see a dramatic increase in their taxable income because they have to pull this money out and count it as income and have that then be taxable. So I would strongly encourage you to consider naming charity, Growing Hope Globally, as beneficiary of your IRAs to avoid that complicated situation with your kids having to pay the taxes. Give the kids the stocks, the bonds, the house, the farm, the things that have appreciated in value, but they will not have to pay taxes on, and give any of your retirement assets to charity or church. Now, the one thing that we are finding more and more people doing is creating what we call a testamentary charitable remainder trust. So in this case, Mary Smith has $500,000 of retirement assets. She transfers that into a charitable trust, or her estate transfers that into a charitable trust. Instead, now her children are going to get income from that trust over their lifetimes. Again, it has to be a 5% payout. So instead of them having to pull the principal chunks out of that IRA, they're just going to get an income stream. Here, the example over 20 years. The estate will give a tax deduction of $184,000. And then after the children's 20 years of income benefits goes away, Growing Hope or the charity gets over $742,000 from that charitable trust. So now that you've had all this excitement of listening to this presentation, what is it I do now? After you do the chores or take the kids to soccer practice or whatever, these are the people that you need to begin surrounding yourself with. Your CPA and tax accountant, I think, are critical. Attorney, life insurance agent, stockbroker, financial planner, on and on and on. People that you need to have that you trust as advisors to put your plan together. I would also include in there a community foundation, or denominational representative, and specifically, of course, your Growing Hope Globally staff, because they want to know what your passions are about how you want your money to be utilized in funding for the future. And so I think I'm going to turn it back over to Rachel to maybe talk a little bit about that.
Thank you, Kirby. And just before I get into this, I wanted to mention, you mentioned a while back the tax ID of your favorite charities, and I just wanted to note that ours is right on the bottom in the footer of our website if you ever need to look for that. So
excellent.
There are many ways that you can help Growing Hope Globally, and it will really depend on what is near and dear to you. So one example is you may wish to support our current needs, such as the agricultural development programs that are currently in need of funding. The tricky part about this is that you need to know when your gift will be made to know which programs are available for funding. So if you want to select a specific program, you can do that with those things that are more like living contributions. However, if you don't know, if you'd like to choose a particular region or part of the world, you can do that too. But not
Oh, so sorry.
necessarily no, you're fine. Not necessarily a specific program at that time. You may also wish to support our current operational needs. Growing Hope Globally is a relatively lean operation, but there are still some costs that we need to cover. So if that's something that you'd like to contribute to, you can specify that. You may wish to just contribute it undesignated and let us just determine where it's needed most. Another option we have is the Hope Fund, which we established a few years ago. This is more for the longer term needs of Growing Hope Globally. The Hope Fund was established, modeled after the biblical story of Joseph, where God gave him the wisdom and leadership to store up grain during the good years to be available when the lean years came. So we hope that Growing Hope Globally won't experience those lean years, but this fund is to help us when that happens. So, and it allows us to continue making a lasting impact even in the lean years. So the Hope Fund is invested according to our board's investment policy, and the interest, dividends, and capital appreciation are reinvested and continue to grow the fund. And the board has the opportunity to pay out up to 20% of the total Hope Fund balance each year if it's needed. Most years it's not needed, so it just continues to grow. So those are two different ways you could consider contributing to Growing Hope Globally. And we're just thankful for each person who has already included us in your estate planning. And if that's something you'd like to do, please feel free to talk to me or any of our staff, and we'll try and point you in the right direction. Kirby, is there anything else you wanted to add before we went ahead and ask for questions?
I don't think so. I'm always happy to be a resource to you and to the board and the organization in whatever ways I can, and to help individuals find their own resources wherever they might be living, either denominationally attached to some organizations or local churches, wherever I can be of best service, I'd be happy to help.
Thank you, Kirby. So looks like one question we have is, I live in a rural area. How do I find a good attorney or tax advisor near me? You listed a lot of different roles there. They're not all available in my small town. So where do I go for those things?
Yeah, that is such a tough thing. Usually I encourage people to talk to their friends, their neighbors. Maybe their children live in a metropolitan area. Find whatever qualified good estate tax attorney that they might be able to find, initiate a relationship with. Sometimes you have to go to the internet to find those, maybe a Zoom conference with somebody. We just really encourage people to find a trusted estate planning attorney, that's basically all they do to make sure that everything is done appropriately and correctly.
Thank you. And I should just note here too that we always want to offer the disclaimer that while Growing Hope Globally would love to help you as much as we can to facilitate the gifts to us, we are not tax advisors or attorneys. So we do really encourage you to work with those professionals to make sure everything's set up in the best way for you. So just always have to throw that disclaimer in there.
Absolutely. And for me too.
Another question is, how frequently should someone update their will? Like, what is the right frequency? Is that something you have to look at monthly, yearly?
Yeah.
What is your thought on that?
Usually our suggestion is that by an event. So when a person passes away, if there is a divorce, maybe the death of a child, is usually event driven. So the times that I've updated my will was number one, when I got married the first time, and then when we started having children. And then the next time was when my father passed away. The next time was when my mother passed away. And unfortunately, the last time was when my husband did pass away. So usually you can get by with when there's a major life event, to make sure you go back and check the beneficiaries and update everything appropriately. But too often we find people that will write a will about who's going to take care of little Johnny, and now little Johnny's 45 years old. So yeah, that's definitely a time we need to get things updated.
That's about right. Well, it does not look like we have any other questions at this point, so I think we will wrap up. But I just wanted to say thank you again, Kirby, for sharing all this valuable information with us today. And thank you for those of you who have joined us. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to our staff. And if you want to pick Kirby's brain, we can probably connect you with her too. So thank
Absolutely.
you for joining us today, and thank you for supporting Growing Hope Globally. Have a good day.
Thank you.